Okay, the next function to look at is minimum, and that seems to be understood by everybody. Just one remark: it's given in a very small version, that is the range. So we're looking at the scores that can be visually checked: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we don't include these ones, but they're obviously empty. They're zeros. So as you prepare to calculate your overall average, be sure to exclude these cells from here. So the point to make is that the function, which is minimum, is usually used to select the minimum value from hundreds or thousands of values. So here we can visually see that 90 is minimum, but once again, this is fairly easy. The if function, however, is not as easy for most people. And the example that we're going to work on here is the simplest one, and it's designed to prepare you for nested if statements, in which you have multiple if statements inside other if statements. The question was asked about logical test. It sounds pretty fancy. It also is called a condition. Logical means logic. What are you looking for? The question was asked about the words logical test and an argument. Once again, we're going to need to look quickly at some of the mathematical terminology to really clarify that. Just remember, before we go there, just remember that your comparison, the moment of comparison, the things you want or do not want to see, are written first, right here under the rubric of logical test. I think it's going to be beneficial for you to check Wikipedia for definition of an argument. It's an input right here. That's all you need to know. Input for that logical test. The test is your thoughts about what you want or do not want. So here comes the moment of practical logic. Most people would like to skip the final exam, correct? So building the argument in favor or against final exam should not take much, correct? We want to compare the minimum scores that a student gets on all these tests. The purpose of the final exam is to replace the minimum score, correct? So one might think that having a B for minimum score and wanting an A for the class will move somebody to try to take the final if the minimum score is below the A grade, correct? Let's go over it again. If the minimum score is not an A and somebody wants to have an A, one moment. Second moment, that person thinks he or she has prepared very well and can indeed pass the final exam for a grade that's higher than B, correct? We can now compare in writing what we have with what we might have. Might have estimation right here. Already have is a score already given. So if this is below A and this is above A or at A, we will not need to take the final exam. However, the risks are small because this already is an A. Somebody just wants a higher grade. we're going to write this in a way that if the hope or conviction grade in B18 is higher than the grade already obtained in B17, then yes, take a final exam. Once again, look at the syntax. We have to have double quotation marks for this. We have to have commas. The logical test is separated from value if true or value if yes, which in turn requires another value. The if statement is programmed to expect two values, yes and no. If it's not punched in, it'll assign a value by itself. We're going to talk about it later because I don't want to confuse anybody with any more information at the moment. Okay, so if B18 is greater than B17, then go ahead and yes, take the test. Or if you're already happy with all your grades and you're afraid to have forgotten half of the material in the semester, no, don't take it. Right there, it's a no. Okay, I hope this settles it for the if statement. If starts here, then follows if, else concludes the whole statement. For the third time, don't forget the double quotation marks here. It's a must. If you don't do that, Excel will tell you your formula is wrong. Next is a big check of the other tab. Everybody seems to be okay with this. The average function is the simple average. I don't think I've seen any problems here. The whole range is selected from top to bottom. Only problems people had was going outside the range, but that's not very common. And here the statement is the same. So average here is simple average, no weighting, which also means all the weights are the same. Now, one thing to mention here, which you will see at the exam, is changing the color of the tab and renaming. That should be very easy. Tab color can be changed by right-clicking on the tab and selecting any color you want. Let's make it red. And renaming is up the same menu. So we don't need to rename this, but we can. Now, each tab, once is created by Excel, becomes an address in its own right. So the next step is to have the two tabs talk to each other. And that exercise did not seem to cause any problems. I'll just need to remind people about the single quotation marks. So we want to read the data from cell C36 on this tab, which we named Homework Scores. We have to use single quotation marks for the name of the tab, put the exclamation point to tell Excel that this is a tab, and then reference the cell address there. Okay. Although this is a simple statement, in fact, we now have programmed a nested macro. Why? Because C36 is a calculated value. We have average there on that tab. So, with these simple projects in the beginning of the course, we prepare students for programming more complex macros than these. Okay. So this concludes the first floor of built-in functions: if, minimum, summation, and average. Let's move on to this group. That's project 3. But before we start, I need to mention that count, the function count, has already been considered. We're not going to talk about this anymore. We'll talk about count if after we talk about VLOOKUP, the vertical lookup function. For the vertical lookup function, we must have a reference table. VLOOKUP is designed to work with tables. Tables could be of different designs. In this particular exercise, we're going to use a really simple table which has 2 columns and only 5 values in each column. Okay, here you're told to use VLOOKUP. You don't even have to think about it. So we need to grade each student with a letter grade. We need to assign letter grade. We already have numerical scores. You are already familiar with the ways of starting this. There's only one way actually. Punch in equals. Start typing VLOOKUP, and Excel already knows what you want. Okay. Now, the prompts here once again are designed to remind people of the most complex lookup table possible. It's not what we're going to do. We'll start with the simplest one. Okay. The lookup value is what we want to turn into a letter grade. I need to emphasize again that you should not type in any values. We must have a cell address here because we're trying to program one cell and then copy to any number of cells without having to do this any more than once. If, as many do, if you do start typing in these values, none of the productivity features of Excel will be available to you. You will have to program everything manually, which defeats the purpose of this project. So we're going to start with the very first one, correct? So right here, lookup value is in cell E8. We got it. As you can see, we have to have a comma now. We have to separate this from the table array on which we're going to work next. Okay, comma. Okay, now we have to scroll down, and you've got to make sure you really hit the scroll bar. If you strike one of these cells, you'll have to start all over again. So be sure to be careful here. Okay. All right, we got our table here. Excel knows to show it as a range. One moment here is that we do not want for these coordinates, for these cell addresses to change as we use our productivity feature, which is the handle with which we'll copy this function to other cells. But for now, let's just put a comma there. Okay, commas are absolutely necessary. Okay, and the letter grade here is in column 2. Just like in everything else, we're moving from left to right. What we need is on the right, it's 1, 2, so it's going to be column 2. Then we close, always close parentheses. Okay. So obviously 92 is an A. Now, if we start moving this in the typical way with a handle without doing anything else, watch what happens. Okay. Non-applicable condition. Obviously all this has moved, and Excel is giving us what we do not want. So this has to go. This is the moment to explain the absolute coordinates. In Excel terminology, absolute means not changing. Okay, so you can assign absolute value to only half of the address. Okay, for example, and by the way, this is done with the $sign. You have to hit Control and then 4, which is also the $sign, right? Okay, so okay, I was pressing Control instead of Shift. When we put the $ in front of half of the address, the column will not change, but the cell itself will. Right now we don't want any of this to change. We're going to fix it at A26, which is the upper left corner of the table. And we're going to end at B30, which is the lower right corner. Now we're going to copy what we have programmed in one cell and copy it to the other ones, and we now have what we wanted. A's are A's, and C's are C's, and B's are B's, and D's are D's, just like the table prescribes. Okay, we're done with this question. That was question 1. For question 2, we'll have a separate video because my ribbon is minimized, and this has to do with data analysis. One important thing here is filtering and grouping of data. And another part of this is averaging the numbers which you are already familiar with. Next is question 3. This is the question in which you use the COUNTIF function.